Today, there are many interesting updates from the Kupiansk direction in Kharkiv Oblast. Ukrainian drone operators exploit 40-kilometer Russian supply line near Kupiansk in Kharkiv Oblast, destroying 15 armored vehicles and troops in 5 days. Russian forces push forward in their bid to expand control along the Oskil River, relying on mechanized assaults to break through Ukrainian defenses. However, with poor logistics and relentless Ukrainian drone strikes turning their armored columns into burning wrecks, the battle for Kupiansk's southern flank becomes a brutal test of endurance. The goal of Russian forces in the area is to expand their control along the Oskil River and reach the city of Kupiansk. This is the most important sector of their long-standing effort to eliminate the Ukrainian bridgehead across the Oskil River, consolidating their gains in Luhansk Oblast on an operational level. To achieve this objective, Russian forces have slowly worked their way to the river at the village of Avdiivka. To further support these efforts, Russians are trying to reinforce their infantry along the river with armored units, hoping to give them the firepower needed to finally achieve a breakthrough. If we take a look at the topographic map, we can see that the main advantage of the Russian forces is their high ground positions from which they can support their efforts along the Oskil River. Furthermore, the gully through the village of Pishanay is surrounded on 2 sides by these high grounds, allowing them to move their forces through here in relative safety from direct Ukrainian fire. However, Russian movement through the gully is heavily complicated by the absence of hardened roads through the lowlands. With the lowlands also being more prone to flooding and muddy terrain, this path becomes basically unusable during the muddy seasons. The fact that Russians must drive 15 kilometers to reach the river, along with their diminished maneuverability and lack of cover, gives Ukrainian drone operators plenty of time to detect Russian vehicles moving toward the river and unleash a swarm of FPV kamikaze drones on them. Geolocated footage reveals the detection of Russian BTR-82 armored vehicles moving to dismount stormtroopers at Avdiivka, unfortunately for the Russians. The drone operators of the Achilles Battalion of the 92nd Infantry Brigade quickly detected them. At the same time, the drone operators of the Achilles, they knocked out the Russian vehicles, forcing the infantrymen to try to advance on foot. This only exposed them to additional strikes, in which the drone operators eliminated the Russian soldiers one by one. At the end of the operation, in just several minutes, the Ukrainian drone operators managed to knock out 4 Russian BTR armored vehicles and 7 soldiers, while the remaining survivors were forced to withdraw. Hereafter, Russians continued sending additional waves of mechanized units, including tanks, to reinforce their infantry fighting along the riverbank. This only led to an increase in losses as the Ukrainian drone operators kept destroying any Russian armored equipment attempting to reach the fighting along the river. As a result of these operations, the Ukrainians destroyed over 15 Russian armored vehicles in the last 5 days alone, with many more destroyed in previous weeks. Overall, due to the poor logistics and lack of infrastructure in the southern flank of Kupiansk, the Russian forces were exposed to precision strikes by FPV kamikaze drones of the Ukrainian Achilles Battalion of the 92nd Infantry Brigade. The success of the Achilles Battalion in repulsing several Russian mechanized attacks on the southern flank of Kupiansk over the past months allowed them to expand from a battalion to a regiment, increasing the size of their unit by nearly 4 times. The huge influx of new Ukrainian drone operators will allow them to counter the Russian attacks to even greater effect, further deteriorating the Russian situation here, and possibly even setting conditions for Ukrainians to retake the east bank of the Oskil River. For now, Russian forces have incurred high casualties in battles across the front lines against Ukraine since the start of the year, and they have not kept up the steady pace of advances that Moscow managed throughout 2024, according to new analysis. Russia's military has been steadily gaining ground at various points along the hundreds of miles of front lines in Ukraine for more than a year, but at a heavy cost in personnel. Figures from Ukraine's armed forces and Western intelligence suggest that daily casualties for Moscow have topped 1,000 for many months, with the highest number of monthly casualties coming in December 2024. Russia is known for what have been dubbed meat assaults, where waves of many soldiers, often lacking sufficient training or adequate equipment, are sent to attack Ukrainian positions. Moscow has focused its efforts on several parts of the front line in the eastern Donetsk region, including towards the cities of Pokrovsk, a key Ukrainian defensive hub, and Toretsk, which sits further east. Russian forces continued to suffer high losses in January 2025, despite a slower rate of advance as compared with previous months in late 2024. The US-based Institute for the Study of War, ISW, think tank, which tracks daily changes to the front line, said on Monday. Kyiv said on Monday that Moscow had lost more than 48,000 soldiers in January, marking the second highest number of monthly casualties since February 2022. Figures from Ukraine's military on Tuesday put Russia's total casualty count in nearly 3 years of war at 842,930, including 1,270 fighters killed or injured since Monday morning. But Western estimates, while slightly lower, come in at similar figures. It is very difficult to verify battlefield casualties. Russian independent outlet Mediazona and the BBC's Russian service reported at the end of January that it could verify the deaths of 2,333 Russian personnel between January 17th and January 31st, putting the total number of confirmed deaths of Russian personnel fighting against Ukraine at just over 91,000. The ISW think tank said it believed Russia's top military officials had likely stomached high casualty counts when they secured larger territorial gains in the fall of 2024.